There's this moment most driven people don't know how to talk about. It's quiet, it's almost embarrassing. It's the moment you realize effort isn't giving you peace anymore. You're still doing the things that used to work, you're still showing up, still carrying responsibility, still pushing through, but somewhere inside something has gone dim. You're not collapsing, you're functioning, but the engine doesn't hum like it used to. The drive is still there, but the joy isn't, and it leaves you wondering what changed, because on paper, your life might look better than it ever has. And for a long time, success obeyed you. You learned discipline early. You figured out how to delay gratification. You outworked people. You outlasted them too. When you applied pressure, you saw results. When you focused, things moved. You became known as someone who could be counted on, someone stable, someone who didn't flinch. Pushing harder was a strategy that worked because the world responded to it. And then one day, without any obvious warning, it stopped working the same way. Not in loud ways, but in subtle ones. You still perform, you still deliver, but inside the returns diminished. You started feeling tired in places that sleep never reach. Rest days stopped restoring you. The breaks that you used to reset you now barely even make a dent. And you thought maybe you just needed a change of pace, maybe a fresh goal, a new challenge. You assumed the solution had to be another form of effort because effort had always been the key. So you tried to upgrade your systems, your routines, your rituals. You looked for ways to get sharper and faster and more focused. But deep down, you sensed that the problem wasn't necessarily technique. It was something harder to name. So a weight you couldn't train away, a dullness you couldn't outperform, an ache that didn't respond to grit. And when that happens, when the tool that built your life stops working on the life inside you, it creates this particular kind of fear. And that misunderstanding usually arrives right about then. You start telling yourself, I've lost my edge, or you've gone soft, or that you're falling behind in some invisible race. You wonder if you broke something in yourself by going too hard for too long. And you label it all sorts of things: burnout, midlife crisis, lack of motivation, spiritual dryness, emotional fatigue. And you search for a diagnosis that tells you that you're fixable, preferably in a way that lets you stay the same. But what if none of that is true? What if you haven't failed at all? What if you just simply reached saturation? A place where your nervous system is full, where your soul has carried enough, where willpower has done its job and now it refuses to be the thing you use for everything. And not because you're weak, but because you're human. Force works on shallow things. It works on schedules and spreadsheets and outcomes. It works on the surface of life, but it has never been the tool that changes the deepest parts of a person. Attention changes those. Honesty does. Surrender does. But those are slower forces. They're quieter. They don't announce themselves with spikes in productivity or applause from the outside world. They feel like loss before they feel like growth. And that's the part no one tells you when you've lived by momentum for so long. Growth doesn't always feel like advance. Sometimes it feels like losing your footing. Sometimes it feels like being asked to lay down what made you strong so you can learn how to be whole. The speed that built your life may not be fast enough to form your soul, not because it was wrong, but because it is taken you as far as it can. Now, there's a difference between striving from strength and striving from fear. One builds and the other exhausts. And when the second one runs long enough, something in you asks for a different foundation completely. Now, not a softer life, but a truer one. Not an easier path, but an honest one. And that request from within doesn't feel convenient. It feels destabilizing. It feels like being invited into a room you've never practiced entering quietly. You may even find yourself grieving a version of you that worked. The you who ran without questioning. The you who measured progress with visible wins. The you who knew exactly what effort would buy. Letting go of that version can feel like letting go of safety itself. But under that grief is something else, a deeper invitation, one into a life that isn't built on proving, but just on being. That's where many high performers get stuck. It's not because they can't go forward, but because the forward now requires a different posture than the one that got them there. You can't will your way into peace. You can't grind your way into meaning. You can't optimize your way into rest. Those things all come from a different place. The kind that listens more than it pushes. The kind that asks better questions instead of demanding better answers. And the questions themselves are simpler than you expect, but they're not easier. What am I still trying to prove? What am I afraid would happen if I stopped pushing for a season? Who am I if I'm not performing? These aren't tactical questions. They're identity questions. And they're the ones that show you where the ache actually lives. Somewhere in there, God may begin to feel closer or farther than he ever has before. Not because he moved, but because you did. You may find that the faith you inherited doesn't hold the weight you're carrying, or that the prayers you memorized don't reach the places you're now walking through. That doesn't mean you've lost faith. It may mean faith is growing roots in darker soil, and roots grow quietly. This stage won't flatter you. It won't give you metrics. It won't feed your ego, but it will offer you a life that fits, a self you don't have to maintain through force, a courage that isn't loud but doesn't collapse, a steadiness that doesn't come from control but from trust, the kind that's not fragile anymore. There is nothing wrong with you. You didn't miss the window. You didn't lose the thread. Something older than your drive is calling you forward. Something wiser than your will is asking you to slow down enough to learn its voice. And it isn't calling you away from your strength. It's just calling you deeper into it. If you want to keep walking this out with me, I write one weekly letter for people who are tired in a deeper way. You can find the link below.